Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth. And the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth, and been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter. Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you. Be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husbandman waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it, until he receive the early and latter rain. Be ye also patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. Grudge not one against another, brethren, lest ye be condemned. Behold, the judge standeth before the door. Take, my brethren, the prophets, who have spoken in the name of the Lord, for an example of suffering, affliction, and of patience. Behold, we count them happy which endure. Ye have heard of the patience of Job, and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful and of tender mercy. But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath. But let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay, lest ye fall into condemnation. Is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. Is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up. And if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. Confess your faults one to another, and pray one for another, that ye may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. Elijah was a man subject to like passions as we are, and he prayed earnestly that it might not rain, and it rained not on the earth by the space of 3 years and 6 months. And he prayed again, and the heaven gave rain, and the earth brought forth her fruit. Brethren, if any of you do err from the truth, and one convert him, let him know that he which converteth the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death, and shall hide a multitude of sins.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Bret Norman Broadcasting Network on this today, Saturday, June 8, 2019. And we are here again in the book, The Divine Program of the World's History by Albert Close. And we are well into the second portion of the book on European history. On page 127 of the book, and in the PDF, I'm not sure. Where was it again, Jörg?
107.
Thank you. And it is the title of Napoleon's Unfulfilled Prophecy, Failure of a Human Prophecy. So very interesting how this book just keeps showing us maybe a little bit different version of what we're used to hearing about these topics. Of course, if you're in America like me, maybe you've never heard of these topics before. So welcome, everyone. And thank you, Jörg and Michael. You're joined with us today, too. And welcome to our broadcast, Michael. Great to have you along with us.
Yeah, and hi, Bret. Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for improving my knowledge in English history, text, and grammar.
Oh, certainly. The more you do it, the better you get. That's the truth with anything we do. You know, it's like with woodworking, too. And I've been doing woodworking now for a long, long time, and I'll tell you what, I get burned out on it sometimes. I do it so much. But yeah, yesterday I was tree trimming, so got a lot of exercise yesterday, and oof, I'm wiped out. But I'm here, and I'm having coffee, and I'm waking up, and I had a good rest, and I'm really looking forward to this, Jörg.
Oh, me too. Yeah, thank you, Bret, and welcome, Michael, of course. Yeah, I'm looking forward to read this book too. I had about 3/4 of an hour. I wanted to read in the book a little bit. I sent you a question if you prepared to maybe give us a good picture of the medals that are shown in the book when we start reading this on the new page in a second. But I found them for myself, so no problem. You don't need to look for them. Yeah, and then I went down to the next page and I found some intriguing text because it is about Napoleon entering the Inquisition in Spain. And so I tell you already before I start reading this book today, we will not go that far into the book. There are many other things or a few other things that I prepared, and we will go into those. And this will be for you guys as much a surprise, or for the ones who watches these, for the ones who watch these videos, or this video, because you have not been given the papers or the links that I prepared, because there just was no time. So, without any further ado, let us turn to the book The Divine Program of World History by Albert Close, written in the midst of the First World War, or the Great War as they call it, speaking about Napoleon's unfulfilled prophecy in AD 1804. There is an obverse and a reverse side of this medal that was minted for the overthrow of England in AD 1804. And this was the medal, and the one that is beneath here, that I asked Bret if he maybe did a research on that, so that he could show the pictures a little bit better than they are in this book. So I prepared them. I will show you them in a minute, but before we do, let's just read the text that is here. Because the overthrow of England AD 1804, this is the name of the medal that was struck by Napoleon in AD 1804, and this one is taken from the British Museum. And the text says that this medal is now very, very, very they only say very, but it is really rare, as Napoleon III bought up and destroyed all of the copies that he could get and that could be recovered. This medal was struck in France in 1804 in anticipation of the success of Napoleon's intended descent on England, meaning invasion, you know. We all read already earlier of the Spanish Armada, right? Rome wanted to get England back under the yoke of Rome. And the Babington plots failed, and the Spanish Armada failed, and the gunpowder plot failed, and now we are 200 years after the gunpowder plot, from 1605 through 1804, and again French Roman troops are standing on the shores in France to fall into England. Yeah. And this times, these troops were not led by the Spanish king, but they were led by the French Emperor Napoleon, who was under the guise of the Freemasons, because he was a 33rd degree Freemason. And we all know that on the top of Freemasonry we find the Black Pope. So Napoleon was a Jesuit puppet doing the biddings of the Pope of Rome. And this medal, as I just read, was struck in France in 1804 in anticipation of the success of Napoleon's intended descent on England. So that means when we return to the knowledge that we have from the assassination of Abraham Lincoln a few years later in history, 1855, we know that there were a few people in a town far away from any cable and train and whatever kind of communication who spoke about the successful assassination of the President of the United States of America, Abraham Lincoln, hours before the event took place. And this
comment?
Yeah, just a second. Let me just finish my sentence, please. And this is something that we know from the book from this General, I don't come to his name anymore, General Harris or something was his name, from the Hunter Commission. And there is proof of that in a few different books, that people spoke of the successful assassination of Abraham Lincoln, and here they minted a coin, even before the facts took place, which never took place. That's another case. So maybe Bret wants to add here something. Please, brother.
Oh, I just wanted to quick say that's not far from where I live at all. St. Joseph, Minnesota.
What?
Where they spoke about Abraham Lincoln's death openly.
Okay.
Yeah. That's really not far from here. So interesting point of history, Jörg.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's why it's so interesting to read several history books, and then to combine the knowledge of the books, and you will get a much better overview. Huh?
No doubt.
So these medals were struck in 1804 in anticipation of the success, which never was a success. The reverse represents Hercules overthrowing an Angepede or snake-footed giant. The inscription Frappé à Londres à 1804 was meant to imply that the blow would be struck in London in 1804. So this is what the inscription here means, yeah? Descente Angleterre, meaning descending on England in 1804, and here frappé à Londres en 1804, 1804. That's what you can read down here, but the picture that I will give you in a moment is much better. Napoleon wears the conqueror's wreath of the Roman emperors, as you can see here on the obverse side. He probably was representing himself as a modern Julius Caesar. So now let's go into the pictures that I have here. Is it this one?
Wow.
This is the one, and this is a much better copy than we have in the book. So here you can see, here beneath it says Frappé à Londres en 1804. Yeah, this 1804. Descente, descending, in Angleterre, England, descending on England. And this is Hercules biting this snake-footed guy, and of course the snake is the enemy from the Roman Catholic Church's of view. Of course, every enemy of the Roman Catholic Church is a snake, and England was probably here being put in the picture as the snake. And then here you have Napoleon, and you have the laurel or the wreath that he has around his head from the emperors. That's this picture. Yeah, and then comes another. Let me just see. Oh, okay, my pictures. That doesn't work now. It's frozen here somewhere. This is the next one that we're gonna have a look at. But let's first go into the text, then we understand what this is about. This is Napoleon's strangling England in 1804. Again, an obverse and reverse side of the coin. On the one hand we have Napoleon, the emperor. Hercules strangles the leopard. So here he bites into the snake, and here he strangles the leopard. And that is the coin that I just showed you. That's this one here. Yeah, so Hercules strangling the leopard. And let's see what the text reads here. This is also a specimen from the British Museum, struck in 1804 by Napoleon. This medal was struck by Napoleon in 1804 in anticipation of his intended invasion and overthrow of England. He had assembled 100,000 infantry, 15,000 cavalry, and 600 guns at Boulogne. At Boulogne is very interesting because, you know, there's a quote from the book Romanism and the Reformation, where a Protestant watchman said that England is more in danger of the infiltration of the Jesuits than at the time when Napoleon's troops stood at Boulogne. And this is exactly what he meant in 1804, when 100,000 infantry, 15,000 cavalry, and 600 guns stood at Boulogne to invade England. The danger of Jesuits entering your country is much higher than this troops just mentioned here. Okay? And you can read that in the book Romanism and the Reformation by Henry Gretton Guinness. So, these troops were stationed at Boulogne, Ambleteuse, Wimereux, and Etaples. In addition, Marmont had 24,000 more at Texel in Holland, that's Netherlands, ready to embark and strike on the east coast of England. So perfectly organized was Napoleon's vast army that the whole 115,000, as the result of constant drilling, were able to embark on the 2,000 transports assembled in an hour and a quarter and be out of harbor in 2 hours. Nelson's watchfulness and finally his great victory at Trafalgar shattered Napoleon's dream. So that's why you have Trafalgar Square in England, in London. And you remember, of course, from the book Rulers of Evil, that on Trafalgar Square you have on the one side standing a British king, and on the other side the first American president, George Washington, leaning on the fasci. On Trafalgar Square. The inscription on the medals refers to the assembling of the 2,000 vessels at Boulogne for the invasion. So, let's go. This is the medal here that we see. Camp de Boulogne, so that means camp at Boulogne. That is the French city on the Channel. And this is An 12 de la RT, I don't know what that stands for. And here, of course, you have MDCCCIV, that is 1804. That is that. And there's the other side is this one, that is again Napoleon with the wrath of the Roman Emperor here. Okay? So, these are the pictures that I wanted to show you for these coins, and this is into leading up a very interesting reading of this book, of which we will not read that much because we will stop here where is the green color. Oh, my email is still on. Gotta close that. So we'll only read until this little paragraph here. The overthrow of Napoleon at Waterloo in 1815, well, that's in the future. In 1804, we read today, British and Foreign Bible Society was founded. Between the 1st century and the year 1800, it is estimated that only 6 million copies of the Holy Scriptures had been circulated in the whole world in about 40 languages. Now, the British and Foreign Bible Societies were founded in 1804. Since the 1800s, so since 1800, the Scriptures have been translated in 446 different languages and dialects. Yeah? So, this means that in the last, let's say, about 1500 years, we only had 6 million copies in 40 languages. And since 1800 and the book writing in 1916, we have 446 languages where the Bible was translated into, and probably a lot more than the 6 million copies, and surely a lot more today in 2019. In 1809, Antichrist Pius VII, carried prisoner to France by French army and reduced by Napoleon to the rank of a French subject and salaried official of the French government, his income being fixed at £50,000 per annum, per year that means. Rome recognized by Napoleon as only the second city of the French Empire. This is why Paris and Rome are so close to each other. Paris is the first French city and Rome is the second French city, still in the eyes of the French, of course. Yeah? And then it continues to say, in 1809, Inquisition at Madrid destroyed by French troops. And this is where we're going to leave the book, because I was so interested to read a little bit about this, and I knew that I had read about this in the past, and I wanted to look that up, so I did a little research, as I sometimes do when doing these book readings, and I came up with a paper from a website that I copied into a PDF that is now 14 pages, that is called The Destruction of the Spanish Inquisition. So this deals exactly with what Albert Close deals with here. Inquisition at Madrid destroyed by French troops. But instead of going into that little that Albert Close dedicates to this subject in the book, we are going to read this Destruction of the Spanish Inquisition, and I found a wonderful book that is interesting for all of you guys, that is called History of the Ancient Christians by Jean-Paul Perrin. And there we're gonna read a little bit from, if we have the time still today, I don't know how long it's gonna take to read that the other 14 pages. Here we're going to read about the destruction of the Spanish Inquisition. So this is a little bit of the same than there, but you see already here the mentioning of, for example, Limborch, who is the author of the book History of the Inquisition, History of the Inquisition, that I read on my second YouTube channel, where I have some 40 videos out that is 750 pages long. Limborch wrote this book in 1692, and then it was translated into English by Adam Chandler in 1731. That is a wonderful book, History of the Inquisition, and he is mentioned already here in the beginning. So I did a little research and found that book on archive.org, and I will provide the links, of course, in the description box of this video. But before we do that, let's read just here the destruction of the Spanish Inquisition. But before I'm gonna go into this reading, which my brothers don't have, but since I share screen, they can read along with me. You read this, guys?
Yep.
Yeah?
Sure do.
I just want to know if any of you has any comment before I continue reading now. Is there anything you guys want to add or to say?
No, I'm interested to hear what you're going to have to go into here, Jörg. Very interested.
Okay, so let's read along. Founded in 1478, the Spanish Inquisition was not finally abolished until 1834, and also that is only a estimation, because I can tell you that the Spanish Inquisition actually continued until the end of the 20th century, until the end of the Franco regime, who died in 1976. That even in the 70s of last century, they still were using many of the abominable apparature they used to torture the people in the Inquisition. And that is a historical fact that you can look up when you have the right resources. Okay? But officially the Spanish Inquisition was abolished in 1834, but we are reading now about 1809. So, in 1809, Colonel Limanowski was attached to that part of Napoleon's army which was stationed at Madrid. While in the city, the colonel used to speak freely among the people what he thought of the priests and Jesuits and of the Inquisition. It had been decreed by Napoleon that the Inquisition and monasteries should be suppressed, but the decree was not executed. Months had passed away, and the prisons of the Inquisition had not been opened. One night, about 10 or 11 o'clock, as Colonel Limanowski was walking one of the streets of Madrid, two armed men sprang upon him from an alley. He instantly drew his sword, put himself in a posture of defense, and while struggling with them, he saw at a distance the light of the French patrols, mounted soldiers who carried lanterns. He called them in French, and, as they hastened to his assistance, the assailants took to their heels and escaped, not, however, before he saw, by their dress, that they belonged to the guard of the Inquisition. He went immediately to Marshal Soult, the governor of Madrid, told him what had taken place, and reminded him of the decree to suppress the Inquisition. Marshal Soult replied that he might go and destroy it. The colonel told him that his regiment, which was the 9th Polish Lancers, was not sufficient for such a service, but if he would give him 2 additional regiments, the 117th and another, he would undertake the work. Now the 117th regiment was under the command of Colonel de Lille, who, like Colonel Limanowski, became a minister of the Gospel and pastors of Evangelical Church in Marseille. Now this is very interesting information, because we are speaking here about 2 colonels in the army of Napoleon who are historically come from a Protestant background, because Marseille is in the south of France, not so far from Toulouse, where the Waldenses and the Huguenots and the Albigenses had lived for centuries already. So, Colonel de Lille, like Colonel Limanowski, became a minister of the gospel and pastor of an evangelical church in Marseille. They had a Protestant background. And that's why they were attacking the Inquisition, which is Roman Catholic. Okay? Now the troops required were granted, and Colonel Limanowski proceeded to the Inquisition, which was situated about 5 miles from the city. It was surrounded with a wall of great strength and defended by a company of soldiers. When he arrived at the walls, he addressed one of the sentinels and summoned the Holy Fathers to surrender the imperial army and open the gates of the Inquisition. Now the sentinel, who was standing on the wall, appeared to enter into a conversation for a moment with someone within, at the close of which he presented his musket and shot one of Colonel Limanowski's men. The colonel then ordered his troops to fire upon those who appeared on the walls. It was soon obvious, says Colonel Limanowski, that it was an unequal warfare. The walls of the Inquisition were covered with the soldiers of the Holy Office. There was also a breastwork upon the wall from behind which they discharged their muskets. Our troops were in the open plain and exposed to a destructive fire. We had no cannon, nor could we scale the walls, and the gates successfully resisted all attempts at forcing them. I could not retire and send for a cannon to break through the walls without giving them time to lay a train or for blowing us up. I saw that it was necessary to change the mode of attack, and directed some trees to be cut down and trimmed, to be used as battering rams. 2 of these were taken up by detachments of men, as numerous as could work to advantage, and brought to bear upon the wall with all the power which they could exert, while the troops kept up a fire to protect them from the fire poured upon from the walls. Presently they began to tremble. A breach was made, and the imperial troops rushed into the Inquisition. Here we met with an incident which nothing but Jesuitical effrontery is equal to. The Inquisitor General of the Father Confessors, in their priestly robes, came out of their rooms as we were making our way into the interior of the Inquisition, and with long faces, their arms crossed over their breasts, their fingers resting on their shoulders, as though they had been deaf to all the noise of the attack and defense, and had just learned what was going on. They addressed themselves in the language of rebuke to their own soldiers, saying, "Why do you fight our friends, the French?" Their intention, no doubt, was to make us think that this defense was wholly unauthorized by them, hoping, if they could make us believe that they were friendly, they should have a better opportunity in the confusion of the moment to escape. Their artifice did not succeed. I caused them to be placed under guard, and all the soldiers of the Inquisition to be secured as prisoners. We then proceeded to examine all the rooms of the stately edifice. We passed through room after room, found all perfectly in order, richly furnished with altars and crucifixes and wax candles in abundance, but could discover no evidence of iniquity being practiced there. Nothing of those peculiar features which we expected to find in an Inquisition. We found splendid paintings and a rich and extensive library. Here was beauty and splendor and the most perfect order on which my eyes had ever rested. The architecture, the proportions were perfect. The floors of wood were scoured and highly polished. The marble floors were arranged with a strict regard to order. There was everything to please the eye and gratify a cultivated taste. Where, then, were those horrid instruments of torture of which we had been told? And where were those dungeons in which human beings were said to be buried alive? We searched in vain. The Holy Fathers assured us that they had been belied, that we had seen all, and I was prepared to give up the search, convinced the Inquisition was different from all others of which I had heard. But Colonel de Lisle was not so ready as myself to give up the search, and he said to me, quote, "Colonel, you are commander today, and as you say, so must it be, but if you will be advised by me, let this marble floor be examined. Let water be brought and poured upon it, and we will watch and see if there is any place through which it passes more freely than others." Unquote. I replied to him, "Do as you please, Colonel," and ordered water to be brought. The slabs were large and beautifully polished. When the water had been poured on the floor, much to the dissatisfaction of the inquisitors, A careful examination was made of every seam in the floor to see if the water passed through. Presently Colonel Delisle exclaimed that he had found it. By the side of one of these marble slabs the water passed through fast, as though there was an opening beneath. All hands were now at work for further discovery. Officers with their swords and soldiers with their bayonets sought to clear out the seam and pry up the slab. Others, with their butt on their musket, struck the slab with all their might to break it, while the priests remonstrated against our desecrating the holy and beautiful house. While thus engaged, a soldier struck a spring, and a marble slab flew up. Then the faces of the inquisitors grew pale, as did Belshazzar when the handwriting appeared on the wall. You remember from Daniel 7?
Mene, mene, tekel.
Exactly. They trembled all over. Beneath the marble slab, now partly up, there was a staircase. I stepped to the altar and took one of the candles, 4 feet in length, which was burning, that I might explore the room below. As I was doing this, I was arrested by one of the inquisitors, who laid his hand gently on my arm, and with a very demure look said, "My son, you must not take those lights with your bloody hand. They are holy." "Well," I said, "I will take a holy thing to shed light on iniquity. I will take the responsibility." I proceeded down the staircase. As we reached the foot of the stairs, we entered a large square room, the Hall of Judgment. In the center of it was a large block and a chain fastened to it. On this they had been accustomed to place the accused chained to his seat. On one side of the room was an elevated seat, the throne of judgment. This the Inquisitor General occupied, and on either side were seats less elevated for the Holy Fathers when engaged in the solemn business of the Holy Inquisition. From this room we proceeded to the right and obtained access to small cells extending the entire length of the edifice. Here saddening sights presented themselves. The cells were places of solitary confinement, where the wretched objects of inquisitorial hate were confined year after year till death released them from their sufferings. And there their bodies remained until they were completely decayed, and their rooms had become fit for others to occupy. Flues or tubes extending to the open air carried off the effluvia. In these cells we found the remains of those who paid the debt of nature. Some of them had been dead apparently but a short time, while of others nothing remained but their bones, still chained to the floor of the dungeon. The Inquisition put their victims to the question. They tortured them. If found guilty, they were handed over to the secular authorities to be relaxed, that is, burned to death. Auto da fe, that is called. In other cells we found living sufferers, of both sexes and of every age, from 60 years down to 14 or 15 years, all naked as when born into the world, and all in chains. Here were old men and aged women who had been shut up for many years. Here, too, were the middle-aged and the young men and the maiden of 14 years old. The soldiers immediately went to work to release these captives from their chains and took them from their knapsacks, their overcoats and their other clothing, and they gave to cover their nakedness. They were exceedingly anxious to bring them out to the light of day, but Colonel Limanowski, aware of the danger, had food given to them, and then brought them gradually to the light as they were able to bear it. We then proceeded to explore another room on the left. Here we found instruments of torture of every kind which the ingenuity of men or evils could invent. The first was a machine by which the victim was confined, and then, beginning with the fingers, every joint in the hands, arms, and the body was broken or drawn one after another until the victim died. The second was a box in which the head and neck of the victim were so closely confined by a screw that he could not move in any way. Over the box was a vessel from which one drop of water a second fell upon the head of the victim. Every successive drop, falling on precisely the same place, soon suspended circulation and put the sufferer in the most excruciating agony. The third was an infernal machine, laid horizontally, to which the victim was bound. The machine was then placed between two beams in which were scores of knives, so fixed that, by turning the machine with a crank, the flesh of the sufferer was torn from his limbs in small pieces. The fourth surpassed the others in fiendish ingenuity. Its exterior was a beautiful woman, or large doll, richly dressed with arms extended, ready to embrace its victim. Around her feet a semicircle was drawn. The victim who passed over this fatal mark touched a spring which caused the diabolical engine to open. Its arms clasped him, and 1,000 knives cut him into as many pieces in the deadly embrace. Colonel Limanowski said that the sight of these infernal engines of cruelty kindled the rage of the soldiers to fury. They declared that every inquisitor and soldier of the Inquisition should be put to torture. Their rage was ungovernable. The colonel did not oppose them. They might have turned their arms against him if he had attempted to arrest their work. They began with the quote-unquote Holy Fathers. The first they put to death in the machines for breaking joints. The torture of the Inquisitor, put to death by the dropping of water on his head, was most excruciating. The poor man cried out in agony to be taken from the fatal machine. The Inquisitor General was brought before the infernal engine called the Virgin. He begged to be excused. "No," said they, "you have caused others to kiss her, now you must do it." They interlocked the bayonets so as to form large forks, and with these they pushed him over the deadly circle. The beautiful image, instantly prepared for the embrace, clasped him in its arms, and he was cut into innumerable pieces. Colonel Limanowski said he witnessed the torture of 4 of them. His heart sickened at the awful scene, and he left the soldiers to wreak their awful revenge on the last guilty inmates of that prison house of hell. In the meantime it was reported through Madrid that the prisons of the Inquisition were broken open, and multitudes hastened to the fatal spot. And, oh, what a meeting was there! It was like a resurrection. About 100 who had been buried for many years were now restored to life. There were fathers who had found their long-lost daughters, wives were restored to their husbands, sisters to their brothers, and parents to their children, and there were some who could recognize no friend among the multitude. The scene was such as no tongue can even describe. When the multitude had retired, the colonel caused the library, paintings, furniture, etc. to be removed, and having sent to the city for a wagon-load of powder, he deposited a large quantity in the vaults beneath the building and placed a slow match in connection with it. All had withdrawn at a distance, and in a few moments there was a joyful sight to thousands. The walls and turrets of the massive structure rose majestically toward the heavens, impelled by the tremendous explosion, and fell back to the earth, an immense heap of ruins. The Inquisition was no more. Some of these readings that we have to do in light to bring the true history to the knowledge of the people by doing these videos. Some truths, some readings are just a little bit too much even for me.
Yes, Jörg. I think we went through some of that in Code Word Babylon already. It's very humbling. Very humbling to know what these men and women and children went through in the Inquisition.
It is so hard to understand that man is willing to do all these atrocities to another man, to a child, to a woman, to a grown-up man. I don't even care about the age, brother. It's always your fellow man, right?
That's right.
And you know, I haven't read this whole paper because I didn't have the time to read it all before the broadcast today. But I knew of the facts because I have read this earlier in other places. I just didn't read this paper that I just read to you. But, well, when we go back to this paper, you see here is the link where I got it from. And I only looked it up because of the Divine Program, because it was speaking here about Colonel Delille. You can see here, Colonel Delille. That was I was looking up, and it was not an easy find. And that's how I found this book here. And this book opened on a certain page. This is just about the search that I did, and I found this book here too, and this book is called History of the Ancient Christians by John Paul Terran.
Wow.
And I want to read to
History
you
of the Ancient Christians?
Yes.
Interesting.
Here's the picture of the book. History of the Ancient Christians inhabiting the valleys of the Alps. History of the Old Waldenses, anterior to the Reformation, with illustrative and notes from modern historians and theologians. A very interesting book that I did a little bit of research on, and I found it on archive.org, and I downloaded the PDF, and I was looking for the place that this search came up with. This seems to be on page 311, that is called The Destruction of the Inquisition in Spain, and I want to read a little bit to you on this. And you see this book has 745 pages in the PDF, and you can download that freely from the internet. We will provide the download link, of course, in the description box of this video. And if it is alright with you, with Michael and you, Bret, I want to read to you a little bit from this book now. Is that
Please.
okay?
Of course.
Yeah.
Michael, do you have otherwise any comment? Because it was just Bret who responded to my reading there, and I guess you maybe also have a comment on what I just read before I continue here, or?
Yeah, you know, I was just the one listening, and for me it was not that hard to imagine what man is capable of, because you see that's a little bit connected to John chapter 16 verse 2. They shall put you out of the synagogues. Yeah, the time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think that he doth God service. And you see that was in the old times and in the Middle Ages, in the Dark Ages, and nowadays it's just the same thing around, because it's just the same thing that also happens in the Second World War, where the German army thought they would do God a service when they had on their belts that God is with us, but whose God was with them? And you see that's just maybe a hint that we should never underestimate our enemy, because our enemy is spiritual, and he can manifest in their minds. And so the people who are in the Inquisition and the real inquisitors are not also restricted to be Roman Catholic, or if you would like to have it more profoundly, Dominican or Jesuitical order, but it's just their mindset, because of their oath and because of their mental exercises, that their mindset is just that they really think they will do God a service. And so I think that on this on this foundation, man is capable of everything. Because you see that nowadays, for example, there are in the Middle East region, there are people who are blowing themselves off in the name of Allah or in the name of any god. They are just blowing themselves off to get into their heaven where they will be rewarded. And so people are able to do anything because when they are spiritual blinded. And that's my point. But yeah, I like to have this discussion and this reading be continued, please.
Okay. So the destruction of the Inquisition in Spain. Among the novel disclosures, and I haven't read a word of this yet, okay, so bear with me if here and there my reading is maybe hampering a little bit. Among the novel disclosures respecting the secrets of the Romish Inquisition, probably not one is more authentic and valuable than the recent statement made by Mr. Limanowski, formerly a Polish officer in the army which Napoleon sent to Spain under the command of Marshal Soult. That officer is now a minister of the gospel residing in the United States, and his narrative so perfectly corroborates the history of the Inquisition by Bauer, Gavin, Limborch, Laurenti, and other testimonies upon that subject, that it claims insertion in this form as elucidating the history of the Albigenses, for whose extermination that ungodly contrivance was originally instituted. The following detail comprises Mr. Limanowski's description of the destruction of one of the Spanish dens of the Inquisition at Madrid, which was performed under his own direction and authority. So, this is another record of what we just read, as it is recorded in this book by Jean-Paul Perrin. In 1809, Colonel Limanowski was attached to the part of Napoleon's army which was stationed at Madrid. While in that city, said Colonel Limanowski, I used to speak freely among the people what I thought of the priests and Jesuits and of the Inquisition. It had been decreed by the Emperor Napoleon that the Inquisition errant monasteries should be suppressed, but the decree was not executed. Months had passed away and the prisons of the Inquisition had not been opened. Okay, this is exactly what we just read, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay,
really
you know, I
is.
couldn't check that. You know, I didn't have the time, so I just see that this is exactly what we have read just a minute ago. So let's see when we come to the end of it that there maybe comes a new revelation to us. In the meantime, it was reported through Madrid that the prisons of the Inquisition were broken open. Multitudes hastened to the fatal spot. And oh, what a meaning was there. Okay, we read all this. When the multitude had retired, Colonel Limanowski caused the library, paintings, furniture, etc. to be removed, and having sent to the city for a wagon load, and then the Inquisition was no more. Okay, this is where we stopped our reading before. So, what does this book here continue with? So let's read a little bit of this before we go back to the book of Albert Close, of course. I didn't know that what I just read to you was taken out of this book. But anyway.
Wow.
Who can avoid feeling rapture in the prophetical contemplation that the period is rapidly approaching when Babylon the Great, that vast habitation of devils, the hold of every foul spirit and cage of every unclean and hateful bird, as we read in Revelation 18 verse 2, that seven-hilled metropolis of corruption shall disappear from the world forever, not like the Inquisition near Madrid amid a blaze of gunpowder, but as a millstone cast from the height of heaven into the depth of the ocean, to be found no more at all, amid heaven's thundering hallelujahs and earth's universal responsive and adoring acclamations, as we can read in Revelation 18, 20, 24 and Revelation 19 verses 1 through 6. Therefore let us riot attempt by hypocritical and anti-Christian sensibilities to sympathize with that popery which is one entire mess of satanic depravity. When we oppose the Romish pestilential apostasy, we only contend against a hell-born contrivance which is blasphemy towards God and a curse to the human family. and which, having arrogated the divine titles and supremacy, tyrannizes over the bodies and souls and brutalizes all the faculties of men. How vast are our obligations to the great head of the Church, who has delivered us from the dread of papal excommunication and the mysterious horrors of that purgatory, which diminished all the energies of mankind, and which peopled the aerial regions and the dormitories of the dead with the most terrific spectres ever present and ever inimical. How superior is our allotment! A crazy, enthusiastic monk cannot now subvert the foundations of human society, that a fiend-like despot may be aggrandized to god-like preeminence. How enrapturing the thought, that ere long neither the Russian with his knout shall trammel man within his superstitious absurdities, nor shall a Turk with his bastinado. Bastinado, that is the beating of the feet. I don't know if I read this in English or I read this one of these days in one of the German books. I think that was in one of the German books, right? The bastinado.
No, I thought I remember hearing you read about that in English. Where was that? Boy, no, I know I've heard you read about that.
When you are fixed to a rack or something, and then you are getting slashes on the soles of your feet. That is the bastinado. Huh?
Got it.
So that was a kind of a torture. Huh?
And it's also been described in Karl May's books.
Oh, was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I read it in English or I read it in German, because I'm reading so many things for the moment.
You may have done both.
Maybe, yeah. Anyway, that's just for the people who do not know what a bastinado is. So that means that the sole of your feet will be slashed with very hard sticks or something like that on the soles where it really hurts. Yeah? So nor shall a Turk with his bastinado bow him to profess the delusions of Muhammad's apostasy. Nor shall a Spanish inquisitor, while he wrecks life from the heart, extort blasphemy from the mouth. Their arms shall be withered forever, and the great multitude shall all combine the ecstatic chorus, Alleluia, for the Lord God omnipotent reigneth. Amen. So, this is about the Spanish Inquisition. I guess the book is in itself very much worth reading. I have the idea, even though this is just a short part of the Spanish Inquisition here, but you can see what we are reading here all about, the precious remains of the doctrines and discipline of the old Waldenses and Albigenses, their noble testimony against the Roman Antichrist. Very interesting. The Roman Antichrist, thank you very much. This is a good find. Ancient confession of the faith of the Waldenses, copied out of the manuscripts bearing date 1120 for 400 years before the time of Luther and Zwingli and Calvin, and 70 years before Peter Waldo, who quote-unquote allegedly founded the Waldenses. The book continues to read. But this
What an excellent find, Jörg.
Yeah, I think so too.
It really is. This is really good.
Yeah. History of the Ancient Christians. Book for the Ages. Printed in copyright 1997, so that's only 21 years old.
Wow, it's fresh. That's amazing. I mean, relatively speaking, my goodness.
Yeah, absolutely.
1897 is not that long ago. Now, when we're looking at the divine program of the world's history, which spans all of history, which is really, really interesting. This is just fascinating. Isn't that something, how Albert Close can just point to one little small thing and then we can expand one big session on this? That's just amazing. Thanks for the research, Jörg. This is great.
Yeah, you know, this is what I love so much about reading these old books. When you get your nose into them a little bit, you start doing your research on anything that is mentioned there that triggers your interest. And the Spanish Inquisition by Napoleon, I mean, I was looking half an hour for the right links because Colonel de Lisle didn't bring up anything. And that was the only thing that he mentioned there. Colonel de Lisle
you're absolutely right. Pouring water through the marble floor, but for what? I mean, it doesn't expand upon why. You know? We haven't read this paragraph yet, Jörg. It's just a tiny little paragraph here.
That's why I wanted to read more about this, because I read already in the past about that fact that was done at the time. I read it in another book. I don't know where I read it, but I read it somewhere. And then I read this little note from Albert Close in this book that we are going to read right now, and I thought maybe there's more on. I want to know more on this, you know, and that's why I started searching on Colonel Delisle, and I found Colonel Limanowski, and I found this little story, and that's why I read it. What we read today.
Well, that's what's so amazing about this little book. It's like little tiny pieces of the puzzle. They might not give you very much detail, but they at least point to the key, let's just call them key words or key people, like this, how do you pronounce his name again now? Delisle? Colonel Delisle?
Yeah, Colonel Delisle,
yes. Yeah, very, very interesting.
Yeah, I thought so too. That's why I looked it up. So let's finish this part of the reading of the book, and on the next page, when it goes into another subject, we are going to postpone that to another reading, right?
Right.
So 1809, the Inquisition at Madrid destroyed by French troops. 100 captives were released. Pathetic meeting of long-lost fathers, husbands, mothers, daughters, sons, etc. Inquisitors were put to death on their own internal torture racks and engines of cruelty. The underground dungeons were discovered by Colonel Delisle, who poured water on the marble floor and watched the seams where the water passed through. Inquisition prison was blown up by Marshal Soul's orders. In 1814, Antichrist Pope Pius VII restores the Inquisition, August 7th, and re-establishes the Jesuits. Hoc est Digitus Dei 2.0. At the beginning of the following year, there were already 737 prosecutions for heresy in progress. Jesuits had been driven underground since 1773. In 1815, overthrow of Napoleon at Waterloo by Protestant Britain and Prussia after 22 years of war. The Spanish Revolutionary Wars, inspired by the atheism of Voltaire, which under the cloak of social reform was really a rebellion against law and order, as well as a revolt against the corrupt governments of the times. Atheism destroyed the corrupt government of the times, but it could not lay a firm foundation of truth and righteousness in France, such as the English Revolution laid in England. Waterloo concluded a European drama in which mightier agencies than those of men had been operating for half a century. Over 10 million men fell on all sides, and the world went through 500 years of ordinary history in 25 years, as writes Ellison in volume 12 of his work. And then we go into the next part, British Army culture 100 years ago. Wellington invading France in 1813 AD. So this is about still the Battle of Waterloo. That is some 30 kilometers or 40 kilometers from where I live. I regularly pass there sometimes. I mean, I've passed there I think a month or two ago. I visited the site of Waterloo for a few times with this big mountain they put up there, and I went to see the quote-unquote show where they have a light show and all that stuff, where they replay the Battle of Waterloo from 1815, and Waterloo is just here in Belgium, 20 kilometers south of Brussels. So, and I live 20 kilometers east of Brussels, so that's about 40-50 kilometers from here to go there. Yeah.
I think if you ask the regular John Doe out there in Europe, they will assume that Waterloo is a popular song by the Swedish band ABBA. ABBA, which means father. You see that every time I come across these so-called ancient war monuments, it should remind us that there was always evil and war and destruction upon this world or upon this earth. But did people actually learn out of it? You see the structure, the hierarchical structure of the earth haven't changed. And so the history is always the same, and history is repeating all over again. So what makes people think that the Inquisition has stopped? It was always the case that the hierarchy, the people, the rulers from the top, the high priests, were ruling and were brainwashing the masses with their propaganda. So it's every time around. I'm really fascinating to learn history, but actually it's the same in all ages, in all countries, for all races. It's always the same, and it's just these little tiny books or coins which are presenting now, which are displaying now, who can reveal the truth. And it's like digging out sandkorn, sand,
Grain of sand.
a grain of sand in an entire beach full of shit, full of lies, full of destruction. And
Yeah,
so
looking for the needle in the haystack, you know.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And so I find this coins and this picture so revealing, because you see that these coins, also from the Roman Empire, before the appearance of Jesus Christ on this earth in human form, was the first, or one of the first methods to take a picture, to have some image. And so it's just another cool thing, because actually 2 years ago I visited German Roman archaeological station, where they have built an amphitheater.
And a German archaeological site you visited. Yeah,
in German. Yeah, exactly. And there also were many things, were helmets and coins and stuff, and so were on display, and it was very interesting, because you see that usually, for example, the German people are actually not aware of the fact that the Roman Empire has had and does have this much influence on their regular life. They don't expect it. They don't count on that. And it's just that you see it everywhere. And so it's not only restricted to the religion part of it, but it's also for the casual life. And so it's just very much important to get the facts straight and to be right on history lessons like this. And it's so much more valuable than looking to National Geographic or other stuff.
Yeah, isn't there the saying, Michael, the man who is not familiar with history is doomed to repeat it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's why it is so important that we do these readings, and it would be so important for many people to watch these readings, to inform themselves about the true oppressed history, because the people who write the history books today are the Jesuits. They are the ones who foment these wars. They are the ones who plan these wars. They are the ones who execute these wars. So you are reading history of the executioner of war. What can you learn from that but lies, but propaganda, and never making or never getting the chance of how do they say, extracting the true relations out of this, the relation between this war and that war, and most and for all, the relation between politics and religion, because that's never spoken about. That's why I found it so interesting to read that these two colonels, Limanowski and Delisle, were both, the best to my recollection, as I can say now, Protestant ministers. Right?
Right.
So there is a connection to faith and to religion and to the military and to politics. And that is what is never ever told us when we watch television or read the newspaper or whatever. It is everything but that relation. And only when you read these books you can make the connection between politics and religion. And you see all of a sudden how important it is to understand that Yeah, I don't know how to put it even into correct words. To see that everything is ordained already on beforehand, that God in his prophecies has written everything on beforehand, and that through Bible study and real history study, we are given the possibility to finally put away the veil they put before our eyes and to see the world as it really is.
I think it would help a lot if people would be able to combine the dots between the ancient history and the actual happening, which is now happening or appears to be happening on our television set. If they could combine the dots that the history is always showing us the direction to the future, then they would combine the experience out of the history, out of the wars, out of the slain of the people, and then they would see what kind of hierarchy rules this world. But they don't. They just see history as past events which have no effect on our usual casual daily life. And I think if we could, or if someone could enable them to learn history, to experience history as a chain of events which led to the actual situation where we are all in now, with the European Union, with the United States, with Trump, with this and that, then they would also see that there is a plan behind it, and they can also then combine this plan with the prophecy of the Bible. But they would have to combine the dots between the history and now and today.
What they are actually doing, Michael, to put it in a little bit easier words to understand, they are putting a woman on the podium, and this woman is given 1,000 different masks. And every time that woman puts on another mask, you think you are dealing with a new woman, but actually you are still dealing with the same beast. And that's what the whole story is all about. That is what God is trying to tell us all through history and all through the Bible. That the woman who rides the beast has thousands of masks. And did we read in Cold War Babylon about the Jesuit order and the 1,000 masks?
That's correct. That's correct.
And that's exactly what they don't want you to know, because when you finally understand that you're only looking at a mask, at mask after mask after mask, then you finally understand that you have to look behind the mask, and you will see the same freaking face behind every mask.
And it's not a pretty one, actually.
Oh, no, it's not a pretty one. You can be sure of that.
No, that's for sure. Very, very, very strange and shocking. But this is what we can expect in this world, because this world is vanity. It is a beautiful world, but there is a deception behind it. There is an accuser behind it. And it's up to us to search that out on our own, you know? We have to become our own Bereans, as it says in the book of Acts. We have to know our scriptures. We have to know our history. We have to know where we came from. And who am I to be talking? I'm learning as much as everyone else. I am no different. I am nothing without the Spirit of Christ. Mm-hmm. Because what does the Bible tell us? In the law and the prophets, it tells us that the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Meaning we should be afraid for our eternal soul. And then we build our lives on top of that. Not the other way around. Claiming that you are the authority and you are more powerful than God, that's blasphemy. But that's what this world runs on. It runs on blasphemy. It runs on idolatry. It's sickening. All we need to do is just be aware of it.
You know, I had to smile when Jörg mentioned that the woman riding the beast wears 1,000 masks. You see, one of the first real women wearing a mask is in the first book of Kings, called Jezebel. And if you and I just had to smile because I had to look up the English word for making when a woman makes herself a pretty face, and it's called make-up. And yeah, then you have to split the words make up. Yeah. Yeah, so they are making some things up. They are pretending to be someone else.
Never mind
It's not just your real face, you see.
Sorry to interrupt you, Michael, but I was just going to say, never mind all of the toxic things they put in these products.
Yeah, sure.
For painting up the faces of the, you know.
And that's a price you have to pay.
Yeah.
That's a price.
It is.
Yeah.
There's a consequence for everything.
Yeah, sure. You see, if you like to wear a mask, you're not yourself anymore. And so that keeps us in line with God's commandment. If I wear a make-up, I like to be someone else, and I'm pretending to be someone else because I'm making things up, or I make myself up. Or I like to exalt myself above others because I wear make-up. So you see, there's just the temptation everywhere to exalt yourself above others, and that's what women mostly do, and nowadays also men are doing, wearing make-up. And so instead of wearing a mask and pretending to be more than you actually are, you should be humble yourself, and you should lay down and go on your knees and pray for guidance instead of thinking to be wise. Right?
Right.
Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools, right?
Yeah, Romans. Yeah.
Romans chapter 1, verse 17 or something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Listen, brothers, I think it is time for Bret to close this down, and then we're going to meet again tomorrow for another part of the reading of the book from Albert Close, and leave our viewers today with a few thoughts on the reading that we did on the discovering of the Inquisition in Madrid, and let the people reflect a little bit on this, and let us hope that they will come back for our next reading of the book from Albert Close and the divine program of the world's history tomorrow. Yeah, I'm done so far, so Bret, I would leave it up to you to close it down for today.
Great, thank you, Jörg, and I will close it with some scripture. Proverbs chapter 3, My son, forget not my law, but let thine heart keep my commandments. For length of days and long life and peace shall they add to thee. Let not mercy and truth forsake thee. Bind them about thy neck, write them upon the table of thine heart. So shalt thou find favor with God, with good understanding in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Be not wise in thine own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. It shall be health to thy navel, and marrow to thy bones. Honor the Lord with all thy substance, and with the first fruits of all thine increase. So shall thy barns be filled with plenty, and thy presses shall burst out with new wine. My son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, neither be weary of his correction. For whom the Lord loveth, he correcteth, even as a father the son in whom he delighteth. And we'll catch up with you next time. God bless. Bye-bye.
From whence come wars and fightings among you? Come they not hence even of your lusts that war in your members? Ye lust and have not, ye kill and desire to have and cannot obtain. Ye fight and war, yet ye have not, because ye ask not. Ye ask and receive not, because ye ask amiss, that ye may consume it upon your lusts. Ye adulterers and adulteresses, know ye not that the friendship of the world is enmity with God? Whosoever therefore will be a friend of the world is the enemy of God. Do ye think that the Scripture saith in vain, the Spirit that dwelleth in us lusteth to envy? But he giveth more grace. Wherefore he saith, God resisteth the proud, but giveth grace unto the humble. Submit yourselves therefore to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw nigh to God, and he will draw nigh to you. Cleanse your hands, ye sinners, and purify your hearts, ye double-minded. Be afflicted, and mourn, and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to heaviness. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift you up. Speak not evil one of another, brethren. He that speaketh evil of his brother, and judgeth his brother, speaketh evil of the law, and judgeth the law. But if thou judge the law, thou art not a doer of the law, but a judge. There is one lawgiver who is able to save and to destroy. Who art thou that judgest another? Go to now, ye that say today or tomorrow, we will go into such a city, and continue there a year, and buy, and sell, and get gain. Whereas ye know not what shall be on the morrow. For what is your life? It is even a vapor, that appeareth for a little time, and then vanisheth away. For that ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. But now ye rejoice in your boastings. All such rejoicing is evil. Therefore to him that knoweth to do good, and doeth it not, to him it is sin. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire.